Hello and welcome to today's episode of Platinum Talks Wealth. Emmy-nominated journalist Jennifer Rogers Markwell changed gears in her television career when she realized the need to help women make sense of investing. She regularly hosts educational workshops to empower women and others to take charge of their financial future. Now, join your host, Platinum Wealth Management President Jennifer Rogers Markwell, as she leads us into the world of money memories, money infidelities, and how these can mold our relationship with our personal finances as adults. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hi, and thanks for spending some time with us. You're joining us on the 100th episode of the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast. And I have said from the beginning that I want my husband as my guest for the 100th episode, and here he is. So, Marc Markwell, thank you for joining. You've been so supportive along the way, and you've listened to every single podcast, and here you are.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say how proud I am of you and this podcast. It's been an amazing 100 episodes, 99 episodes I've seen, and it's been amazing to sit back and really digest what financial infidelities are, as well as the financial memories that translate us through life. So I want to say I'm proud of you for doing this, and I think it's been really interesting. It's really made me reflect on what my financial memories, what my money memories really turned into later in life. So I hopefully can share something interesting that maybe we haven't done before.
Yeah, no, awesome. So I always ask, and you know this, first question is tell us all about you and why you do what you do.
Okay, well, the most important thing that you probably need to know about me is I'm your husband. So very proud of that.
I do
Very
know
proud of
that.
you.
I do know that.
Yeah. Very proud of you. So, again, I've been thinking about this for a while because you've asked me to do the 100th episode. And so I'm going to take you back a little bit before I get into me and where I am now. But I think it's important that I've realized that while we have seen that parents don't talk about finances and money and how to better yourself financially down the road, we end up getting stuck with our parents' money memories and the consequence of that, good and bad. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my parents and explain a little bit about me. So obviously you know all this, but my parents came from humble backgrounds. My mom was born in literally Nazi-occupied France and moved over to the United States when she was 14. And so came from very humble beginnings there. And her parents worked very hard for the American dream. My dad was born in Nevada and also came from humble backgrounds. And his money memories, I think, started when there were days he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to eat or not. And I think that has a profound effect on him. And while they raised me, I received some of those memories and emotions that came through. So my dad saw what had happened when, there's not a lot of money to feed your family. He didn't want to do that for his family and himself. So the only thing he knew what to do was try to get a career that was stable and safe and made enough money to put on the table. So he had his best friend had a father who was an engineer, and they seemed to be doing well, never had money concerns. And so he decided he must be a civil engineer because that's what he equated to having money on the table, or money on the enough money to have food on the table. So he got a civil engineering degree, put himself through college, worked from when he was 12 years old, and never stopped working through college. And then when he graduated college, he went into construction. So that's what I experienced growing up, as being in the construction industry. And I also was hearing from my parents, hey, the best jobs are engineering and accounting, anything with math. The problem was I wasn't good at math, but that probably pushed me a little bit harder. And so I thought, well, I want to get into construction too. So I pursued an engineering degree. And as a result, I was not feeling like I needed to go make a bunch of money or, pursue a dream. I was literally following my dad's experiences and saying, I need to get a good job that puts food on the table. And so went through engineering, and I decided that I wanted to go to law school. I think I felt like just having a degree wasn't enough, especially when I was going to school, because jobs were hard to come by, even for engineers. So I wanted to do something above and beyond, and something I was passionate about, which was the law. So I graduated from law school and had a short detour before getting right into the construction industry, which I've been in for a while. But I think the important thing to know is, I look back at what my path was, and it was really molded by my parents telling me that you have to have a stable job, not pursuing a dream. It was just about having a stable job. So fast forward, I'm very, very happy with my career. I've been in real estate and construction for most of my career, and currently a CFO and general counsel for a heavy civil contractor. And I love my job, and I realize it's because I love the people around me. So what I notice is when things are hard and you're going through a hard time, it's important to laugh with your colleagues. And I think that obviously goes with your team too. I think you got a great team, and I really see how you guys have fun, and I think that's super important.
Yeah, I think, I mean, back to just having that dynamic with the people that you work with, right? If you're supporting each other and lifting each other, that trickles down to how you're serving, your clients, regardless of, I think, what field you're in, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
So thanks for sharing all that, and thanks for
Yeah,
being here. Another thing we talk about, as you know, on the podcast are money memories, which everyone has such a unique story. And that's really the reasoning why I started the podcast, is hearing this from different clients, wildly successful clients, clients who are, starting out or starting over. Everyone goes back to that initial memory. And I know you've shared some already, but what's a money memory specifically that comes to mind when you think about how that molded your relationship to money as an adult?
yeah. Ironically, it's kind of a strange one, and I really obviously thought about this. What is my money memory? And I keep going back to this. But when I was in preschool, um, don't know why, but we were making little ceramic gifts for our parents. It might have been Father's Day, or I am not sure exactly. And my dad would come home at night, and he'd always have change on the counter. It was all over the place because, back then you didn't use a credit card. So every time you bought something, you got change back. And if you went to breakfast and lunch and you bought a soda or whatever it was, you'd have a lot of change at the end of the day. And then at the end of the week, you'd have even more. So I made him a little ceramic dish to put his coins in, and it was kind of quite hideous actually, but he liked it, he loved it. And it wasn't long after I made that, he would fill it up with coins, and he says, "Hey, I want you to take the coins, and they're yours." And they were a lot of pennies. And I thought that was the most amazing thing, because I could turn in, literally a week of him spending money. I would have sometimes $4 or $5 a week just taking his coins, if I was lucky enough to get enough quarters. And then over a period of time, I would roll them up, and then I'd have my mom or my dad, take me to the bank, and then I turn it in for a whole $20 bill. So to me, it was about, I think, instilling that you can save, and it actually does add up pretty quickly. And I think that's true in your 401k. And I think that's true, however you save, whatever that looks like. It doesn't sound like a lot of money. But when you compile that week over week over week after, and then year after year, it's quite amazing. So I always notice that just a little bit goes a long way. And if you can increase that, weekly, monthly, it really boosts your overall savings.
I think when
The
you're
other
just
money,
when
oh,
you're
sorry.
disciplined as well, right? Like when you're
Yeah,
disciplined, kind
100%.
of navigating through, like you were consistent about it, right? Same thing with putting money into on a consistent basis into your retirement accounts. But you were consistently, rolling pennies and getting pennies. Same thing as like doing the contribution side of things.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's suited me well, and obviously being married to a financial advisor helps, because now I can see things in a different way. So, but yeah, I was really thinking about that's actually been really good for me. The other money memory, a couple other memories associated with my parents. Obviously, they had a lot of impact on me, but my dad was always worried about money, but he had a good job and he had a good income. But I think his money memories affected him later, that he wasn't where he wanted to be. And so it was a point where they had to downsize their house, and the kids were out of the house and there was an opportunity to do that. And he finally got comfortable at that point. But it was interesting that I grew up with that kind of panic about money, and I didn't want that. And I think what that did for me in some areas, it was like, well, then, another way to make more money is spend less. So I would just say, if I don't need to spend it, I'm not going to spend it. And if I don't need anything, then it's not something I'm going to want to buy. I also feel like I also had some uh, some inhibitions about spending money on myself, like I wasn't worthy. And I think that probably stemmed from my dad's relationship with money and the fear of not having enough if something was going to happen. Because it was important to him to have the security if something happened, like he lost his job or the market turned, or when he was in construction, if he couldn't get the next project going. So that was a lot of impact on me. And I think as well, I really tried to reflect on what other things were happening around that time. Ironically, later in life, when my father had retired, I was in the same industry as him. So there was some crossover with some people that were towards the end of their career, and I was at the beginning of my career. And they stressed to me how important the relationship with my father was to them and how much they respected him because he paid them early, not on time. He paid them early before he got paid. And to them, that was just unheard of. But because it was so important to him that his colleagues, his partners weren't worried about money, he made sure he had enough in the bank to pay them before he got paid. And and I think that sticks with me. I think that's so important to build that relationship with your colleagues is, pay people on time. I see it at work. And I think it's super important, and I think it gets overlooked. I have conversations with people and kind of joke like, hey, if you ever if for some reason we haven't paid you on time, let me know. And a couple people have said, I've never, ever had to think about calling you because you guys weren't paying me. And that makes me proud. And that's because I was proud of my dad when I got that feedback.
And I feel like your dad's reputation is still, I mean, beloved, right? I mean, everyone always shares anytime we're out with him or, people saying, "Oh, your dad, he's the most ethical person and he was such a good human being." And it's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome that his reputation is, still very, very strong, even though he's been retired for a long time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, ironically, you don't really think about the relationship and people thinking he's all ethical, but a lot of that has to do with money. He treated people fair. Construction can be a tough industry. You don't always get paid for something you did, but my dad made sure everybody got paid because he didn't want anybody to get hurt. And so even if it hurt him, that was very important to him. And that really is that's a money memory. I think it stemmed from him growing up that way. And when he got to a place, I won't let my friends and my colleagues and my partners that I'm working with have that fear of not getting paid. So it's quite amazing how you really start thinking about this and digesting it, and it just kind of follows you through life, the money memories and how it impacts you down the road.
It's huge. And everybody has their own story, right? From wherever
Yeah.
background, whatever ethnicity, wherever, part of the world, quite frankly, everyone has a story. So thank you for sharing. So another thing we talk through are financial infidelities, which again, ironically, we had a talk this morning at brunch with some people about that, and they're like, what does that even mean? And truly it means something different to everyone, whether that means you're not being impeccable with yourself with your own finances, you had a business partner or a spouse or a partner in some sorts that wasn't, forthright with you and honest with you about money. What's a money or a financial infidelity rather that you are open to sharing that, others could learn from?
Yeah, so obviously I've had a lot of time to think about this and been quite amazed over all your guests and the different infidelities that they have chosen to discuss. And some of them kind of caught you on guard, not because they were totally alarming and it was like your partner took all the money and had a side business that you didn't know about. It wasn't that. It was the infidelities to themselves. That's what resonated the most to me, is because it's not something you think about. The infidelities to yourself, whatever that looks like. And I have a couple, one of which goes back to my dad, and it's kind of a reverse infidelity. It's kind of strange. But I think one of my dad's biggest regrets, as you know, was retiring early. And I was trying to think about that. He did that. He regretted it. But why did he do that? I think he did that because he set a goal for himself to be comfortable when he knew that he would have enough income and savings that he didn't have to retire anymore. So once he hit that threshold, he said, "I'm done." And he was just looking at the money side. He wasn't looking at the emotional side and the side of building, rapport with people and the collaboration and the mental health part of working with other people. He was looking clearly at the financial side, which I think ultimately that was a financial infidelity on his part because he chose to retire based solely on money when that really shouldn't have been the only reason because he was young enough and had a lot to offer and had another 15 years at least that he could contribute, and even if he worked part-time. So that was one that I thought was really interesting and one that I was trying to, think of something new and different that you hadn't seen before. But I think
And on
that
that
will,
note too,
yeah.
like I feel like I see that a lot with folks when they retire, right? We've done all this financial planning to get them to this point where they can retire comfortably. They've done the right things when they were younger or whatnot. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of folks that will retire for 6 months to a year and they're like, okay, what's next? Like, what's my next career
Yeah.
move? Like, again, that mental stimulation to be able to work and create, no matter what it is. They could be watering plants at, a Home Depot or whatnot, but really creating something where they have that purpose again to make a difference in whatever that looks like. And I find that a lot of folks now aren't traditional, I'm retiring and, eating bonbons on the couch. Not that that's what everybody does by any means, but it's definitely a different mindset that I've noticed over the past probably 5 or 10 years where there's a shift in folks for sure.
Yeah, and I think about this a lot too because I'm getting older and I'm like, I can't retire because to me it's part of my self-worth. I do enjoy the collaboration. I do enjoy, having fun. And look, sometimes work's not fun. It is actually work.
Yeah.
But what makes it interesting is the people around you. And to me, that's important is to have uh, a work environment where you enjoy your colleagues and you have fun, even when, it's not the most fun experience at that particular time. So I think that we need to look at it differently because for me, it's not going to be financial decision. It's going to be a decision when, somebody says, "Hey," taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you really shouldn't be working anymore. Like you might have lost it a little bit." And that to me is important. And I think people should realize that. To your point, that's probably why a lot of people think, okay, I'm gonna retire and then now what? And they get bored.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a super valid point. And I feel like that is really the mental health side isn't communicated, I think, enough. I feel like that's kind of one of those taboo subjects a little bit, quite frankly. That again is coming out more and more now, but I think that that is good for people's brains and their purpose and their souls of again, if you have a career that you don't love, that's okay, but what's something that you do love? What's a passion that you weren't able to do in your career path? And what does that look like for you? How can you
Yeah.
enjoy, the next, season of your life, whatever that looks like?
Yeah. And I think people are living longer and I think they're better shape in some cases, mentally and physically.
You are listening to the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
Hey, it's Jennifer. I wanted to take a quick break to remind you that you are worthy to have a seat at the table when it comes to money and your finances. Both me and my team at Platinum Wealth Management, want to meet you where you are, whether you're starting out, starting over, or have been investing for years. Reach out to us at platinumwealth.net or call us at 775 717 0001. We'd be honored to help.
And now, back to the podcast.
I think when you get to that, 65, 70, to me, I think that's still pretty young. And
Yeah.
I think there's things you can do, even if it is a hobby, if it's a second career that you wanted to be a photographer one day and you never were, and it's like, well, now you can, you know.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, to put this on you as well, I think one thing that I'm grateful for, which there's a lot of things by all means, but we communicate. I think a lot of, marriages and partnerships, people don't necessarily have these conversations to this level of like, what does retirement look like for you? What does it look like for me? How do we intertwine there? what do bills look like? I mean, I tease, I'm like, okay, I got to pay you some rent, right? At the end of the day, it's not rent, it's our mortgage together. But I mean, I feel like we're not perfect by any means, but I think we do a nice job of really communicating and over communicating where's, necessary when it comes to finances and our financial future.
Yeah, yeah. So there's another one I want to talk about, and actually, it again, I am trying to be very raw and vulnerable with you today, but I actually in this one I want you to be raw and vulnerable and tell me your opinion because this one is about you, and it's something that we did together. And people who watch the show know that you're frugal and you grew up with parents or grandparents that were from the Great Depression, and as a result that was your money memory and how you deal with money is it comes from a different place where it's like you gotta save, you gotta prepare to have money in case something goes wrong, right? So I want to take you back to one of our trips where we renewed our vows, which we do as most people know on this podcast. We've done it over 30 times. We renew our vows, and we happened to be on a cruise ship, and we were in Greece. And you talked about doing this, but you were really reluctant because of the money. But and for those that don't know, sometimes we renew our vows. It's literally us on a beach. Sometimes we take a selfie. Sometimes we're lucky enough to grab somebody, take a picture. But you really wanted a professional photographer to follow us on a couple ports for the pictures. And you lamented over the cost of that. And I think I just said, go ahead, let's do it. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't the end of the world, especially when you're paying $12 for a bottle of water on a cruise ship, right? But I
True.
remember you really tormented, but I
Yeah.
knew it meant a lot to you. And what's interesting is we splurged on that, and those pictures are hanging up outside our bedroom, and I look at them every day and just smile and very thankful for that experience. But I also look at that and say, would have that have been a financial infidelity if you didn't do that for yourself that time? Now, I'm not advocating that every time you want something, you spend it, but isn't the reverse also true that you can also withhold from spending money and really
Totally.
at your detriment because of your financial memory?
No, I'm like getting a little emotional with this. Yeah, I mean, I feel like looking back, I mean, I was definitely in a different place then than I am now. I feel like now there's definitely, oh my gosh, I'm totally getting emotional. There's definitely a worthy factor in this now where I feel like now I can justify to myself that I deserve things more than I did probably earlier, on in my career. I feel like
Right.
I was just trying to, do the best I could and do the right things along the way. And I feel like for me, this, like pictures are so important because then you can look back on that memory. And
Yep.
I feel like with memories, like that is just priceless, quite frankly. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't love pictures being taken and you're normally a pretty good sport about it, but for me I look back on that and I think it's because of my grandparents too. Like for them, they had like, oh my gosh, like one set of pictures and it was from, I don't even know, like maybe 1981, 1982. Like they had their wedding photos and they had pictures from Olin Mills. I mean, to date that story, right?
Yeah.
Old school pictures with like the bluish background. My grandpa's in like a blue big butterfly collar, that was like their pictures that they had. And I look back on that and we don't have a lot of pictures of them. We have pictures because I forced Graham to take pictures, towards the end. And now I have so many photos of her and I'm so grateful for that. But I look at that too, is that is experiences are somewhere that I feel much more comfortable spending money than being frivolous in other directions. And granted, I've grown, I feel like a lot in the past 10, 15 years for sure, right? Just personally, my self
Mm.
worth, like who I am, how I feel about things. But yes, I agree because if I wouldn't have done that, we wouldn't have those pictures to look at. And I look at those and
Mm.
it's such a sweet, special memory for me. And I think that for me is definitely justifiable. More so even now than it was then.
Yep.
That's so funny you bring that up because we did not talk about what you were going to talk about on this podcast at all.
Nope.
This is all completely just you sharing this with me. I had no idea where you were going to go with this. But no, that's such a sweet memory for me and I don't have any regrets on that. And then moving
Mm.
forward, same thing. Like I feel like pictures, memories, like things like that. Even like one of the best gifts that you and Isa have given me is a picture frame, a digital picture frame. And it sounds very minimalistic, but that is the sweetest thing ever, sitting having breakfast and watching these memories flood through of pictures and things that we've done, whether it's us snapping a photo or us doing it professionally. Like that is, I am 100% confident and comfortable spending money in that arena where I wasn't 15 years ago.
Yeah, and I think too, we've tried to instill with her that memories are more important than things. And honestly, that was her idea to get that digital frame. But I had no idea how many pictures were gonna show up on there that I remembered when I saw the picture, but I'd frankly forgot. And I think it's one of those things that reinforces that the memories are there and they're always there, and that helps to bring it up, but it's something that is priceless to your point. And I knew that you were going to say that about those pictures. They are priceless, and you've always felt that. But I felt in that moment, looking back, I mean, I was, going 50-50, and I was trying to talk you into it because I knew you wanted it. Not that I wanted some stranger to follow us around in a strange city for 2 days, but I knew how important it was to you, and I'm glad you did it, because otherwise I think it would have been a shame not to have those pictures, because a lot of people that come to the house even comment on them.
Well, and we see them every day. I mean, literally, they're outside
Yeah.
our bedroom. Like, it's very
Yeah.
special. And remembering that memory of exactly where we were, how we felt. Like, I mean, that picture, those pictures bring up just so a flood of memories every time.
Hmm. Yep.
That was a
Yeah.
good one. That was a good one.
Okay, so before you move on, though, I mean, after 99 podcasts, I want you to be raw and vulnerable with us for a change.
I feel like I have
And
been. I have been. I
well,
got teary-eyed
keep
on
it
this
rolling.
episode. Here we are.
Put your socks on. Keep it going. So no, basically we all know who you are. I think we know your money memories because you've talked a lot and you shared. But of all the financial infidelities, what sticks out the most to you from your previous guests?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's so many. I feel like there's such a flood of memories from folks. I think some of the ones that stand out. I mean, there's folks who were in cults who were in, trying to escape financial situations. There was a gal who realized her dad had a whole nother family because she was helping him with his banking,
Yeah, remember that.
kids, wife, everything. There were people, whose partners went out and bought cars and didn't tell them and just rolled in the driveway with it. There's people, hiding their spending. It really, all of these stories, I feel like I learned from as we go through this podcast too.
Yeah.
There's so many different perspectives on things, and again, there's a few overlaps here or there, but everybody has their own unique story, and it just makes me appreciate that we're doing this because we're sharing these stories where people normally would never have these conversations. This would have been such a taboo subject to even talk through. Like the financial infidelities, the money memories, like those were never discussed. And I think us getting those out there and sharing them with each other, we can all learn from each other and continue to do better.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too, just to add to, what the other previous guests, if you compile some of those together, because it's easy to listen one, but then if you try to put them together and really see what they're saying from a bigger picture, was that I feel like a lot of people kind of admitted that they got caught up buying things to make themselves happy. But
Yeah.
ultimately, that's not what made them happy. Ultimately, they realized that later after getting a credit card debt, after buying something that they didn't need, because you get that initial urge of satisfaction when you buy something, but that's fleeting. And I think that was, another infidelity that I think I garnered over all the different guests that have said in some cases they really kind of regretted that, because that emotion isn't going to last very long. Like a new car, and I've always said new car lasts until you have to get your first car wash, and it's really not new anymore. And not saying if you need a new pair of shoes, buy a pair of shoes that you can afford that actually feel good and don't hurt your feet, right? But that doesn't mean you need 400 pairs of shoes, right? So the sense is I think that was another overarching lesson, is it doesn't make you feel good in the long term, and actually it makes you feel bad, because then if you're in credit card debt, that's a bad deal.
And I think it goes back to the void, right? Like, why, back to your money memory, why are you doing that to fill whatever void is there?
Yeah.
I mean, you made the conversation about 400 pairs of shoes, right? For me growing up, depression kids, like it was a big deal I mean, not that I didn't have clothes because I did, and Pop and Graham did so much for me. But at the end of the day, like it was a big deal. Like we did a lot of thrift shopping when that wasn't the cool thing, you know? And so for me, I think that's probably why, like, I had a lot of pairs of shoes, and now I'm like, okay, purging out. But emotionally, there's a tie to that,
Yeah.
just because
Yeah.
you feel good about getting something, it fills a void because you didn't have. But then it's also like at the point where are you holding onto it so tightly because you are coming from a place of thinking again that you're not going to have that, right? I feel like there's an abundance feature that kind of happens where you're like, I'm good. I have everything I need. I have more than what I need. I'm so grateful, to the point maybe where before, for me specifically, is am I going to have? Am I going to have? It's a place of lack instead of a place of really thinking about how grateful you are for what you have and the abundance that's there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think it's also there's a fine balance, right? Like, I mean, we all have our, vices, if you will, or when you're in a place and you have you collect something, whether it's shoes or whatever it is,
Or tiki mugs.
or tiki mugs, yes, is somebody I know collects tiki mugs, but you have a passion for it and it's healthy. But I mean, you've even asked me like, well, what's the end game?
Yeah.
And I had to stop and go, I don't know, because you're right, we don't have any more room. And not that it was unhealthy or anything, and there's reasons why I enjoy them because of a lot of it's from our trips or different things, but it's you have to check yourself sometimes and say, I don't, you're right. What's the end game? We can't move into, an airplane hangar and display tiki mugs. What's
We
the end game? I
could.
don't know.
We
Yeah,
could, but that
no,
would be an
no,
interesting adventure
no,
in itself.
no. No, I don't think so. But I think after, 99, now 100 episodes, I think it's important to look at them collectively too, because I think there's lessons, obviously lessons in every single one of them, but as a bigger picture, what does that mean about us as people? What are we trying to do? What does it say about us? Other than, and again, I'm glad you're doing this because I think it makes us think about things that we would have never thought about. I Financial infidelity, I never even heard about that or what that was until you talked about doing the podcast. And I was like, oh yeah, that's an interesting topic. I would thought you'd be talking about people cheating on their spouse and spending money on the other person. And obviously that happened, but boy, this has taken us a different direction too, which I think has been fascinating.
I think the opportunity to be able to learn and grow along the way. I mean, I remember when I told you I'm going to do a podcast and I want to write these books and I want to do this, and you're like, no, no. And now you're like, go at it. Like, you see where I really want to grow and learn and myself, but also lift others along the way. And I
Yeah.
think it goes back to the initial thought process of like, making people feel worthy regardless of where they're at with their financial journey. I know I share that a lot, but that resonates in my heart so much, right? So no matter where you are, like, you're worthy of having a financial journey and getting to where you want to be and really kind of mapping out your goals. But I think initially being raw and vulnerable is where it comes from. I mean, being able to have these conversations and listen and learn from maybe something that you're individually sharing, maybe something that you heard someone else share. Like, there's a lot of overlaps in this, and I feel like, again, this is where we need to lift each other and learn and do the best we can.
Yeah, and I think you practice what you preach truly, and I know you do like to help everybody, whether it's uh, financial literacy or the podcast or help anybody with a path. And I think that's something that unfortunately our society doesn't spend a lot of time on. They just, they call it a 401k, and some people don't even contribute because nobody sets them aside and said, hey, this is really important to your future and you're leaving money on the table if you don't. But I think that's, kind of stems from nobody talks to their kids about money. My dad's only words of wisdom, which you'll understand, was never owe anybody money, and your credit card is only to be used as much as you have in your bank account. And I practice that and I appreciate that, but he never told me how to invest or what that looks like. And I think that's something that, we're missing.
We're trying to change the narrative. I mean, even with Issa at home, right? When she was little, we're like, let's get her in some stock classes. Let's let her figure it out. And I remember, talking through like, what would she resonate with if we kind of leaned her in a direction? And she's definitely a Disney lover. And so, I mean, that exact moment where we're like walking through like Disneyland, she's like, I own this place. And we're like, no, you own like maybe a piece of a
Right.
rock that's in that like that little area over there. But for her, she learned so much at such a young age, and I thought that was so important as being a little girl, right? To have your own kind of
Yeah.
financial wits about you to learn. I mean, I didn't have that. Like a lot of people didn't have that. But if we can plant the seed for her, which we did when she was very young, I mean, I look at where she is now, and she's even said, she's like, I've talked to my teachers and they're like, wow, how do you know this? I don't even know this. So if we
Yeah.
can, try to educate and lift others, and I mean, quite frankly, I feel like women are coming to themselves, right? The wealth transfer is coming to women. I want women to empower themselves so they can make the best decisions for what their goals are. Because again, in relationships and marriages, it was always the male who kind of came forth the table in most cases, who had the conversations, and the wife or the female was kind of like, okay, I'm not really paying attention. I don't want to be there. I don't know what it is. Or they were completely kept out of the conversation.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's one of those things to have the conversations. I mean, maybe it's something that you have a lot of free time now. Maybe you can start up another podcast and talk about how to educate the today's youth. But we have talked about that. Like
Yeah.
if there was a podcast with kids talking to kids, that would be phenomenal. That would be super helpful.
That's the goal in all my free
Yeah,
time. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Singing from the rooftops everywhere we can, for sure.
Yes, yes. So
So,
congratulations again, 100th podcast, amazing, great job.
and you're
I
not done
can't
yet.
believe it's
I
on.
still
I
have
know
one
I'm
more
not done.
question
I
for
just
you.
want. I know I'm not done. I know my last question, but I just wanted to say that
Thank you.
because I didn't say that at the beginning. So yeah, proud of
Thank
you.
you. No, I appreciate it. And you've been super supportive along the way with all my crazy, things that I want to do and, run in 15 different directions to be able to, make a difference in the world.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so on to tips and tricks.
Yes. What you,
Okay. I know this. I
you,
know the script. I've heard it once or twice.
you know it
So
well.
there's a couple ones that I think are important that I think get overlooked a little bit. One of them is we were talking about this morning. I was looking at my subscriptions on my phone, the apps, and I was going through, do I need this? Nope, not renewing this, not renewing this. So I'd encourage you to go into your app and go to your Apple ID if you have an iPhone, but look at your subscriptions and see if you really need them. Because sometimes you're going to be like, yeah, I use that once and I'm paying $30 a year. I don't need that. So that's important. The other one too is, and people are uncomfortable with it, but to me, it's your money. I don't think you should be uncomfortable with it, but calling those services like cable company, internet provider, and saying, is there any special deals out there? I'm paying X amount per month. Can you look at a different package? Can I bundle? Can I get rid of something? Do I need all these TV shows? And it's really complicated now with all these subscriptions for TV. Do you need Paramount and Peacock and Netflix? And then if you have this, you get this free and do my double pane. So I think that's real important to look at. But don't be afraid to call these providers and say, is there a special offer? And I think people don't do that because one, of the time, two, it's uncomfortable. But as you know, I've wrangled with them many times and said, hey, what do you got? And if you don't get an answer you like the first time, call back because sometimes you'll get the right customer service representative.
Yeah. And I want to piggyback on all of this. And I said this a little earlier. I think communicating with your spouse or your partner is huge when it comes to finances. And I mean, you and I are both
Yeah,
obviously busy in our career paths, running around. We tease we're like two ships in the night sometimes, right? Like seeing you, and I actually really like you as a person, so I want to hang out with you more. But we're
thank
we're
you.
busy.
Yeah.
But having these conversations and making sure that you're on the same page financially.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if some spouses each have a subscription to a channel and they've been watching on their phone or their iPad, and they don't know that the other one's paying for one too. So yeah, I think that's really important is communication, which I think goes hand in hand with a healthy relationship. But I think when it comes to finances, it's super critical because it's uncomfortable sometimes to say, whether you have too many apps on your phone or, you need to be a little bit more cognizant of what you buy at the grocery store. But I think it is very important to do that so you guys are on the same page.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for coming on the episode. I know we said that a long time ago, and I can't believe we're already here at the 100th episode and you're here with me.
Maybe you'll have me back for the 200.
I'd love to if you're open to it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
Proud of
thank
you.
you. And those of you listening and or watching, hopefully you'll join us in the next Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, Platinum Talks Wealth, please subscribe and share. For more information about Jennifer Rogers Markwell or Platinum Wealth Management, please visit www.platinumwealth.net. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and their companies are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Platinum Wealth Management.